Before time had a name, there was silence. No cities, no kings, only endless mountains and storms above a sleeping earth. And from the heavens came light, piercing the clouds like fire. Beings of pure radiance descended, neither men nor gods. They were called the Watchers, guardians sent to guide the first humans. They were meant to teach wisdom, not power, to protect the children of earth, not rule them. But even the purest light, when placed among shadows, begins to fade. As they walked among the tribes of men, they watched the children of earth grow. Fragile, curious, full of wonder, they saw them learn to build fires, to carve stone, to speak the names of things. And slowly they began to feel something no angel had ever known: attachment. From the heights of Mount Hermon, their leader, Semyaza, watched the human world below, his eyes filled with longing. The daughters of men were beautiful, not in the way of heaven's perfection, but in the way of earth's imperfection. Soft, fleeting, alive, and in that weakness the seed of rebellion took root. "We will take them as our wives," Semyaza said, "and from them shall come great children, heroes upon the earth." At first the others feared him, but desire burns quickly in divine hearts. One by one they agreed. 200 angels, bound by oath, swore to share his sin. And so the sky opened. The Watchers came down in the form of men, shining like dawn. The daughters of earth trembled, yet they did not flee. Under starlit skies, the divine met the mortal. From that forbidden union, the Nephilim were born. They were not like their fathers, nor were they like men. Their bodies grew with unnatural speed. Towering above forests, their voices echoing like thunder. They could uproot trees with one hand, crush stone beneath their feet. To some, they were gods. To others, monsters. The people of the valleys built altars to them, offered them sacrifices, sang their names into the wind. The Nephilim ruled as kings and conquerors, their shadows stretching over the mountains. But power breeds hunger. Soon their thirst for blood could not be quenched. They devoured the herds, then the beasts of the wild. When no flesh was left to hunt, they turned upon mankind, the very race their fathers had come to protect. The world fell into terror. Villages burned. Rivers ran red. The cries of humanity rose up to heaven, and heaven answered. But before judgment came, something else stirred. The Watchers, seeing the ruin their children had wrought, sought to teach mankind the arts of defense, secrets of heaven that were never meant for earth. They taught the forging of iron and bronze. They revealed the craft of war, swords, spears, and shields. They taught the use of enchantments, the power of herbs, and the reading of stars. Knowledge became weapon. Wisdom became sin. And the earth, once pure, was now corrupted by forbidden fire. High above the clouds, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel stood before the throne of the Almighty. "Look what has become of your creation," they said. "The earth groans beneath the weight of their sin." And the voice of the Creator thundered, "Behold, the sons of heaven who defiled themselves with mortal flesh. Their children bring ruin upon the world. I will cleanse the earth, and their names shall be erased." The angels bowed and departed, carrying with them the decree of divine wrath. But among mankind, one man still walked in righteousness. His name was Enoch, a shepherd, a scribe, a man who spoke with heaven. One night the ground shook and a voice called him to the mountains. There he saw a light brighter than the sun. The Watchers appeared before him, their faces filled with sorrow. "Enoch," Semyaza said, "you are favored among men. Go before the Most High and plead for us. We have sinned, but our hearts were deceived by love." Enoch trembled. "You ask me to plead for those who defied heaven?" Semyaza bowed his head. "We are bound in shame. Yet if mercy exists, let it be known." And Enoch ascended in a vision. The winds carried him to the gates of heaven. He stood before the throne of God, surrounded by flames and countless eyes. "Lord of spirits," Enoch said, "the watchers beg for forgiveness." But the voice that answered shook creation. "No prayer for the fallen shall rise. Their children shall perish. Their names shall be blotted from every tongue." And so it was decreed. The Nephilim would face the flood. The watchers would face the pit. The judgment of heaven was coming. In the valleys below, dark clouds began to gather. The Nephilim stood upon the mountains and laughed at the coming storm, their arrogance blinding them to doom. But even giants cannot stand against God. Thunder roared. Lightning split the sky. Rain began to fall, not in drops, but in torrents. Rivers swelled. Oceans rose. The earth split apart, and the waters swallowed everything. The cries of the Nephilim echoed for days as they vanished beneath the flood. The watchers, bound in chains of light, were cast into the abyss. A prison beneath mountains of fire, sealed until the final judgment. And when silence returned, the world was reborn. But not all was forgotten. Fragments of the old world remained. Bones buried in rock, stories whispered by survivors, myths that would one day become legend. The name of the Nephilim was lost from the scriptures, but not from memory. When the flood waters receded, the world was silent once more. The mountains stood bare. The forests were drowned. The air carried no sound of beasts or men, only the whisper of the wind over endless water. And in that silence, God remembered Noah. The ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat, and from it stepped the seed of a new world. Humanity was reborn, humbled, cleansed, and afraid. But even in this new dawn, shadows of the old world lingered, for not all of the Nephilim had perished. Some say their spirits, the Rephaim, the wandering dead, remained on earth, cursed to hunger forever. Others whisper that a few of their bloodlines survived, hidden within the children of men. When Noah's sons spread across the lands, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, they carried more than life with them. They carried memory, and memory is a dangerous thing. Generations passed. Men built cities once more, Babel, Akkad, Nineveh. Stone rose upon stone. Kings began to reign, but the blood of the watchers still whispered beneath the surface. In the line of Ham, through Canaan, ancient power began to stir again. And among their descendants were names that chilled even the bravest hearts. Enoch, Og of Bashan, Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. They were not ordinary men. Their size, their strength, their cruelty, all marked them as something else. In the deserts of Mesopotamia, stories began to spread, of warriors who could lift gates of bronze, of kings whose thrones were carved to fit bodies twice the height of mortal men, of tombs so vast that the skulls found within could fit helmets of iron made for two. The people began to whisper again, "The Nephilim have returned." From the east a man rose, Nimrod, the grandson of Ham, a hunter of beasts and later of men. He gathered the scattered tribes and forged an empire. He built a tower so high it touched the clouds, a challenge to the heavens themselves. And when the Almighty saw what had been done, he said, "Behold, they are one people, and nothing they plan will be impossible for them." So the tongues of men were divided. The Tower of Babel fell, but Nimrod's bloodline, the ancient forbidden strength, endured. From Babylon to Egypt, from Canaan to Greece, traces of the Nephilim spread through the world like veins of fire beneath the earth. The Anakim rose in the hills of Hebron, towering men whose presence made even Israel's spies tremble. The Emim and Zamzumim ruled the plains, fierce and terrible. When Moses sent 12 spies into Canaan, they returned in fear. There we saw the giants, the sons of Enoch, who come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so we were to them. The echoes of Genesis were alive again, but these stories were dangerous. The priests and scribes of later ages, fearful of what they could imply, began to erase, censor, and rewrite. By the time the sacred texts were gathered, the tale of the Watchers and their monstrous children had become apocrypha, forbidden scripture. The book of Enoch, once read by prophets, was cast out. Its pages, describing the descent of the angels and the birth of the giants, were labeled heresy. For what church could endure the claim that divine beings had fathered monsters? Yet the truth does not vanish simply because it is buried. Across ancient lands, in stones and bones, their presence still speaks. In Bashan, archaeologists found megalithic circles older than any known temple, giant tombs built for bodies that no ordinary human could fill. In Peru, skulls elongated by nature, not by binding, rest in forgotten graves. In Sardinia, legends tell of a race of colossal beings whose bones were hidden by the church itself. Every continent has its myths of giants: the Titans of Greece, the Jotnar of Norse lands, the Daityas of India, the Rephaim of Canaan, different names. One truth: the memory of the Nephilim lives on. But the strangest part comes not from myth, but from the Bible itself. In the book of Numbers, after the flood, the word appears again. There we saw the Nephilim. How could this be? If the flood destroyed them all, how could the Nephilim walk the earth again? Some theologians whisper of a second descent, that more angels fell in later ages, unable to resist the same temptation that doomed their brothers. Others suggest the bloodline was never fully wiped away, carried quietly through Noah's sons, hidden in plain sight. The Canaanite kings, the Amorites, and the Rephaim all bore traces of it. When the Israelites marched to claim the Promised Land, they were not fighting men, but echoes of the old world. Even the mighty king Og of Bashan was called the last of the Rephaim. His bed, described in Scripture, was more than 13 feet long. The Bible gives this detail not as poetry, but as a record, a warning. And so, the war between heaven and the blood of the Watchers continued, not in the clouds, but among men. The sons of God had fallen, their children had risen, and now humanity stood between divine wrath and ancient corruption. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. The world forgot the truth of its beginnings. But the stories, the forbidden stories, endured in secret scrolls and hidden monasteries. When scholars in Ethiopia preserved the Book of Enoch, they preserved the memory of heaven's rebellion. When early priests translated the Septuagint, they struggled with the word giants. The Hebrew Nephilim became gigantes, but the meaning was lost. In Greek, it meant earth-born, not fallen ones. The truth had been buried beneath language itself. Yet there were those who never forgot. In the dark corners of the Vatican Library, beneath locks and sigils, ancient manuscripts still whisper of the first Watchers, of how their children walked among pharaohs, of how even mighty Goliath, who faced David in the valley of Elah, was of their kind. The Church, in its silence, preserved what it could not destroy, because to reveal it would be to admit that mankind's history is not simply human, that our blood carries echoes of heaven and hell alike. Even today, in deserts and mountains, explorers uncover the footprints of forgotten giants, megaliths that defy explanation, tools too large for human hands, bones too massive for belief. The world has been reset many times. Floods, plagues, empires, yet the pattern repeats. Every few thousand years knowledge rises again from the dust, and with it, the whisper of the Nephilim returns. But one question remains. If their blood still flows, then who carries it now? Are the Nephilim truly gone, or simply hidden, wearing the faces of kings, leaders, and those who shape the destiny of nations? The ages turned. The fires of Babel faded to dust, and the memory of the Nephilim, those ancient giants born of heaven's rebellion, sank beneath layers of myth, faith, and fear. But the blood remembers. For the power that once shaped mountains and bent nations to their knees could not be erased by time alone. It flows, quietly, invisibly, through the veins of men who do not know what they are. After the flood, the world was new, but not clean. The sons of Noah scattered, carrying fragments of the old world within them. Among their descendants, certain lines were marked, not by sin but by something older. The ancient scribes of Israel whispered of the Rephaim, the shades of the mighty dead, still haunting the land of Canaan. And in the east, the book of Jubilees recorded that after the flood, unclean spirits, the disembodied souls of the giants, began to corrupt the sons of men once more. They could no longer take flesh, so they took minds. Empires began to rise: Sumer, Akkad, Egypt, each bearing signs of knowledge far beyond their years. Mathematics carved into clay before men had even learned to farm properly. Pyramids aligned with the stars. Temples resonating with frequencies only the heavens could inspire. Some say this knowledge was remembered. Others say it was whispered, by voices not of this earth. For though the watchers had fallen, their spirits were not destroyed. They became the unseen kings behind thrones, the invisible hand behind crowns, and those who listened grew powerful. In Egypt, the pharaohs claimed divine right, not metaphorically but literally. They said their blood came from the gods who walked among men. Their tombs were built like stairways to the stars, a bridge between heaven and earth, as if to call their fathers home. The priesthood guarded this knowledge fiercely. They spoke of a golden race, beings who ruled before the flood, too perfect, too powerful, too dangerous. And the farther back we dig, the clearer it becomes. Every ancient civilization tells the same story, of gods who descended and giants who ruled. In Canaan, the Israelites faced remnants of that blood. David's battle with Goliath was not merely a fight between two men. It was a reckoning between human and hybrid, between the sons of Adam and the sons of the Watchers. And when David's stone struck the giant's forehead, it did more than kill him. It silenced a lineage that had ruled since before the flood, or so it was believed. But the blood of heaven cannot die. It hides. As empires fell, the descendants of the Nephilim faded into secrecy, shaping history from the shadows. Kings of Mesopotamia claimed descent from the gods who came from the sky. The pharaohs of Egypt, the kings of Tyre, and the Atlantean myths all spoke of rulers with divine, radiant blood. And as time moved on, that claim shifted from divine right to royal bloodlines. The crowns of Europe were said to carry a blue blood, the mark of ancient purity. The Merovingians of France traced their ancestry to beings who were half divine. The Church called them heretics but could never erase their lineage. Even in the Middle Ages, secret orders, the Templars, the Rosicrucians, the Illuminated Brotherhoods, searched for remnants of this blood. They called it the Grail line, the Dragon line, the Sangreal, the royal blood. But what they sought was not just a cup, it was a bloodline that began when angels first touched the earth. In the hidden corners of the Dead Sea, fragments of lost texts spoke of a covenant made between fallen angels and their human sons, a vow to preserve their knowledge until the time of unveiling. From that secret seed grew the ancient mystery schools, passed down through Babylon, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. The philosophers called it wisdom, the priests called it heresy, but its keepers called it the light of the Watchers. When Christianity spread, the Church tried to extinguish these embers. The book of Enoch was banned. The tales of giants were turned into allegory. The Watchers were renamed fallen angels, stripped of their history, their faces, their names. But in monasteries deep in Ethiopia, monks still copied the forbidden words. The sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. It was not poetry, it was memory. Centuries later, in secret societies and royal chambers, the whispers returned. Leonardo da Vinci's journals hinted at ancient knowledge from the stars. Sir Isaac Newton, a scientist of reason, wrote more pages on biblical prophecy and the Nephilim than on physics itself. Even the founders of nations carried symbols of the old world: pyramids, all-seeing eyes, radiant halos. Were these mere echoes of ancient art, or hidden tributes to a bloodline still walking among us? The deeper scholars dig, the more the patterns emerge. From the Sumerian Anunnaki to the biblical Watchers, from the Greek Titans to the Mesoamerican gods, every culture speaks of a time when divine beings descended and mingled with man, and every story ends the same way. They fell, but their children remained. Today, scientists search our DNA for traces of lost species, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and sometimes anomalies that do not fit. Ancient skeletons with elongated skulls, massive femurs buried in forgotten deserts, bloodlines that carry unexplained resilience, intelligence, or strength. We call them mutations. But ancient scribes had another word: legacy. Perhaps the giants never truly disappeared. Perhaps their power changed form, from the brute strength of old to the intellect that shapes empires, technologies, and nations. Maybe the Nephilim no longer raise towers of stone, but towers of glass and steel. Maybe the Watchers no longer descend from heaven, because their descendants already rule below. If so, then the question is no longer whether the Nephilim existed, but whether they ever left. Their mark is in our myths. Their symbols are in our cities. Their knowledge echoes in the sciences we call our own. And perhaps, in some hidden hall of power, the last of their blood still sits upon a throne, remembering the fire that once fell from the sky. The story of the Nephilim is not just ancient history. It is a mirror, a reflection of humanity's hunger for divinity, and the price we pay when we reach too high. From heaven's rebellion to man's corruption, from divine love to monstrous pride, their tale is our tale, because within every human heart lies that same forbidden spark, the desire to be more than mortal, the will to rise beyond the bounds of heaven itself. And so the Watcher's legacy continues, not in bones, but in blood, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the world to remember what it has forgotten. The giants may have fallen, but their shadows still walk among us,